What would you do if a mysterious stranger offered you a deal that could change your life forever? Say it out loud before you answer, because words have weight and choices cast long shadows. Kofi had practiced that question in his head for years without knowing it. Every time he scrolled past another smiling face on a screen, another mansion behind a ring light, another caption about destiny and hustle, another giveaway that never reached his inbox. He lived in a town where red dust lifted at noon and settled in the creases of everything at dusk, where goats learned the shape of the road better than some drivers, where the radio switched from high life to breaking news to a sermon and back again before the kettle boiled. Kofi helped his auntie sell phone credit and bottled water in a kiosk patched with old election posters, and he fixed feature phones for a little extra. He had a sharp memory, quick hands, and a patience that had gone thin like a coin rubbed smooth. Every day he watched buses roll south toward the city where glass buildings caught the sun like fish scales, and he told himself that tomorrow he would be on one of them. Tomorrow kept winning. The town was not poor of soul or sound, only short on luck that turned effort into outcomes. The elders still opened meetings with proverbs about rivers and stones, but the price of cement kept climbing, and the clinic's generator coughed itself to sleep. Kofi saw his classmates return from the city at holidays in imported sneakers and rented swagger, and he felt something bitter move under his tongue. He was not lazy. He repaired. He saved. He applied for microloans with forms taller than his hope, and when the grants went to cousins of cousins, he swallowed the insult like medicine. On market nights, the town stretched awake. Lanterns swung over stalls. Smoke from grills rose in patient ribbons. Drum loops boomed from two speakers tugged to their limit, and the air filled with bargaining that sounded like laughter. The old market square had a new edge. Mobile money agents under umbrellas, a drone buzzing once to drop off a parcel, a preacher with a portable amp, a politician's aide handing out caps no one wanted to wear in daylight. It was on such a night, with the moon trimmed neat and the power blinking, that Kofi saw him. The stranger did not push forward like sellers or lean back like thieves. He occupied space the way a well-written sentence sits on the page, unavoidable and easy to miss if your mind is noisy. He wore a dark suit that did not pick up dust, and when he smiled, the crowd did not reflect in his eyes. "Kofi," he said, and Kofi's name felt returned to him, pressed and folded. "Walk with me." They moved past the spice sellers and the cloth stacks and the boys juggling ripe oranges for tips. The stranger spoke like he had built the road they used. He said he knew the ache behind Kofi's jokes, the ledger in his head that totaled every favor and loss. He talked about opportunity as if it were a person who needed a seat and some water. "What would you give," he asked, "for a turning point that does not turn back?" Kofi thought of his auntie counting coins with tired fingers, of his younger sister drawing dresses in the margins of homework, of the screenshot album on his phone filled with apartments and cars and business ideas that started with "if only." The stranger did not promise paradise. He offered leverage. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "Money in your account. A warehouse of stock at your command. Connections that answer when you call. A shop sign so bright even the sun looks twice. You will climb in months what others climb in decades. But a price is a bridge. It connects where you are to where you say you want to be." Kofi laughed to show he was not naive. "What's the price?" The stranger tilted his head, as if listening to a drum from far away. "Something you cannot live without." He let the words sit, heavy and polite. Kofi thought of kidneys and blood and laughed again, softer now. He thought of time, of luck. He thought of the way choices funnel or free a man. Around them the market throbbed, the speakers clipped, the night vendors lit one more wick. In that noise, the stranger's voice kept its shape. "You want the city to know your name? You want your mother's voice to lift when she says it? You want to stop apologizing for existing without proof of success? Then answer your own opening question. What would you do?" Kofi did not pray. He did not consult the elders. He did not call his auntie. He told himself that destiny is a door that hates knocking. He put out his hand. By morning, the town had a new answer to a question no one had dared ask. How quickly can fortune arrive without breaking a sweat? The alert hit Kofi's phone before sunrise. The number pulsed there like a fever dream that chose to be kind. When he stepped outside, a truck idled by the kiosk with pallets of consumer goods, boxes of solar lanterns, phone accessories, sacks of rice branded with a logo no one had seen yesterday. A man with a clipboard, efficient and bored, confirmed the delivery to Kofi Ventures Limited. The sign followed by noon. It was blue and clean with a font that made neighbors straighten. The stranger was nowhere, but his presence tracked Kofi like shade. When the bank manager shook Kofi's hand at lunch and called him sir, when a city supplier messaged to say a container could be diverted at a discount, when a local counselor stopped by to ask how the town could support such youthful dynamism, Kofi felt the ground under him behave like something he owned. He promised himself he would be generous. He hired 3 classmates and paid them more than the bars did. He gave his auntie a salary and a chair without splinters. He sent his sister a tablet and data. He delivered food to the clinic and fuel to the generator and posed for a photo without rehearsing a smile. The town shook their heads in the rhythm that means praise and suspicion at once. People take blessings with both hands but count fingers afterward. The money moved like music. Every day brought a new message, a new deal, a new way the world said yes. Kofi learned the city's grammar fast. He drove there twice a week in a borrowed SUV that became his by paperwork and nods. He wore shirts that forgave sweat and a watch that announced meetings before his mind could. He made a reel of his journey that reached 100,000 views by the weekend and ignited a thread of comments ranging from "teach us" to "this is what focus looks like" to "be careful." He slept less. He ate standing. He spoke about scaling and margins and brand presence and impact, words that felt like floors added to a house he had built in his head as a boy. To every success he attached a promise. He would fund a water borehole, he would stock the school library, he would sponsor a coding club. He meant it. Then small things began to misbehave. It started like a joke. A child pointed at him in the afternoon and asked why he did not make a shadow. Everyone laughed because the sun was at the wrong angle and the road was uneven and dust plays tricks. But the next day, a tailor looking up from his machine frowned and moved to one side, as if searching for something that refused to appear. The day after, an old woman refused his money and crossed herself with a tradition that predated crosses here. Kofi checked his reflection in the shutter of a closed shop. The metal gave him back his face, his shirt, his watch, the bandage where the carpenter had nicked him. But the ground near his feet stayed blank in a way that had no excuse. He blinked hard until shade from an awning leaned over him and covered the shame. He remembered the stranger's phrasing, how the price had been described and not named. He walked into sunlit alleys when no one watched and tried to stamp his shape onto the dirt by force of will. No mark held. A dog watched him and whined. Not afraid, just recognizing wrongness the way animals do. Still, money solves the problems it can see. Kofi kept moving. He told himself it was fatigue or dehydration or a trick of light caused by mirrors of success. When the first supplier tried to change terms, Kofi negotiated and won. When a tax official hinted at difficulties, Kofi was generous. When an influencer asked for a paid partnership to promote his from kiosk to company journey, Kofi said yes and filmed with a sunset behind him to make meaning cheap and beautiful. At night, he felt a pull in his chest like homesickness while standing at home. He tried prayer, then podcasts. He arranged a visit to the chief and offered a donation for a community festival, and the chief thanked him with words that felt weighed. After the meeting, an elder drew him aside and asked if his grandfather's name still meant anything to him. Kofi smiled and answered correctly, because he had learned the lines and believed himself sincere. The elder touched Kofi's shoulder and left his hand there too long. Kofi understood that this was not blessing but measurement. He drove to the beach one Sunday to rinse his head. Children built castles and a preacher baptized and kites hunted wind above. But when Kofi walked near a couple taking photos, their camera refused to focus. He stepped back on impulse and watched the lens find them again as if he had been glare. That night he dreamed in silence. He woke with the taste of iron in his mouth and the thought that nothing should be taken that is not paid for. He scrolled to the first message the stranger had sent him and found no thread, as if the number had never existed. He wrote it on paper from memory, but the digits would not stay in order. Morning brought a new truck, another deal, more praise. It felt like his own noise drowning out his small voice. He had risen in months what others climb in decades, and the view scared him. At noon he walked into direct sunlight and watched the ground. It watched back with indifference. The price had a shape now. It was missing. Once you notice emptiness, you hear its echo everywhere. The shadow is not decoration. It is a receipt that proves you belong under the sun. In the week that followed, Kofi learned how fast prosperity can isolate a man. Not because people envy, though some did, but because absence makes conversation slippery. Friends laughed softer around him. Lovers searched his face for softness and found glass. Children, who are the most honest citizens of any place, tagged him Mr. Bright, and then stopped coming close enough to test the joke. The animals were worse. Goats stepped around him with the deliberate caution of elders avoiding an argument. Dogs stared with that same puzzled ache and chose other paths. Birds corrected their flight at the last moment, as if heat rose from him in a pattern they did not recognize. Kofi walked into his warehouse in the late afternoon, and the rows of boxes looked like stacked silence. Listen long enough and even money starts to sound like leaves. He went to the clinic with a donation, and the nurse thanked him without meeting his eyes. He went to church and stood under the high windows and tried to sing his way back into proportion, but the hymn he chose turned to a thin wire he could not grip. Back at the kiosk, his auntie looked like a woman who had reached a conclusion before she heard evidence. "My son," she said, "sit." She told him a story older than radio about a fisherman who borrowed the river's patience and forgot to return it. "Water can forgive everything except forgetting the name of your own thirst," she said. He nodded like a good man and stood like a man in a hurry. That evening he drove to the edge of town where an old baobab made its own weather. The stranger was waiting because of course he was. People think evil is dramatic. Often it is punctual. He looked as neat as the first night, though the dust tried to negotiate terms with his suit. "You have done well," he said, and Kofi hated how true it was. "The market respects you. The city opens for you. Your name travels without a bus ticket." Kofi cut him off. "You took my shadow." The stranger considered the word like a coin. "I accepted the price you allowed," he said. "You said something you cannot live without. Now you learn what cannot means when it changes jobs." Kofi stepped forward. He wanted to hit the stranger and knew it would be like punching fog with manners. "Give it back." The stranger shook his head the way a bank manager does when numbers do not obey. "Return requires exchange. You have enjoyed your outcome. You have broadcast your testimony. You have put your face before faces. The algorithm knows your shape. To cancel a season, you pay with everything the season gave you." The wind pushed a ribbon of dust between them like a timeline. Kofi thought of the borehole he had promised, the library, the coding club, the clinic fuel, the salaries. He thought of his auntie's chair and his sister's tablet and his mother's voice lifting when she said his name. He thought of the first morning alert, the rush of yes, the feeling of finally being valid. He thought of boys he'd grown up with who had left for boats and never called back. Of the friend who posted motivational quotes because the real story would break a screen. He thought of the hand he had put out in the market and the way the stranger's palm had felt like agreement that doesn't blink. "What if I keep the wealth," he asked, "and learn to live like this?" The stranger smiled with the confidence of gravity. "You can keep anything you are willing to become, but understand the math. Without a shadow, you cannot mourn or be fully forgiven. You cannot enter certain rooms even if doors open. Love will misplace you. Food will feed you without nourishing you. Sleep will visit but not rest. Your name will gather reputation but lose story. You will be seen and not witnessed." A motorcycle rattled past on the road and the rider turned his head as if something cold had leaned out of an invisible window. Kofi stood with his hand on the baobab's skin and listened to how old wood talks to heat. He asked the stranger the only honest question left. "What is the full price?" The stranger nodded at last like a teacher whose student has found the chapter heading. "Everything the deal brought you. Money, goods, relationships made under its roof, permissions granted by its light. The public applause, the private brag, the phone numbers that answered only because your name carried currency, the favors you were only offered because you had become a shortcut. Surrender them, all. Then wait in emptiness the way seeds wait in soil that looks like silence." Kofi's mouth filled with the taste of iron again, the taste that warns a man that a new life is drilling through. He thought of the water that had not yet flowed for the borehole and felt shame. He thought of the library books stacked in his mind and felt grief. He thought of seeing his own silhouette again and felt the common sense of it press behind his eyes. He looked at the stranger and said, "I want to be witnessed." The stranger's smile was a small thing that made the evening colder. "Tomorrow," he said, "we will unbuild what you rushed. Bring your signatures. Bring your keys. Bring your pride dressed simply. He walked away without footprints deep enough to remember him. Kofi stood there until the sky tilted into stars and the nightbugs tuned their choir. On his way home, his phone lit with new opportunities, each one a perfectly shaped trap for a man already falling. He turned it face down and listened to his own breathing like a stranger learning a song. Undoing is slower than doing, and that is its mercy. At dawn, Kofi opened every door he had hurried through and closed each one behind him with both hands. He called the supplier and returned inventory at a loss that felt like a receipt for a life he would no longer rent. He met the bank manager and signed away the credit line that had treated him like a prophecy. He gathered his workers and paid them severance with respect, telling them the truth without dragging them into his bargain's shadow. He went to the clinic and delivered fuel one last time, then explained to the nurse that the next drums must come from a steadier river. He visited the chief with the festival donation still in his pocket and asked permission to redirect it to the borehole fund under community control, then handed it over and left before thanks could make him weak. He posted a final video without music or captions, a short record in plain clothes. Not every path is a path. If I made you believe shortcuts are safe, that is on me. I am going to learn patience again. Comments split along lines known since the first story was told. Some mocked. Some warned him to delete. Some said they had felt the same emptiness in different clothes. Some prayed with emojis. Some promised to unfollow. He did not check views. He scrubbed his sign off the shopfront, letter by letter, until blue plastic under his nails matched the sky in chips. He sold the SUV, broke 3 contracts flavored with flattery, returned gifts given with strings braided into the wrapping. The town watched, because towns are universities. His auntie brewed tea strong enough to wake a stone and did not say, "I told you," because love prefers usefulness. His sister slid her tablet back across the table and said she could borrow one at school until they found a way that did not taste like speed. Kofi walked under the noon sun to the same open space where the child had asked about his shadow. He looked down and prepared himself for blankness. It was faint at first, as if drawn with charcoal by a careful hand, but it was there, hugging his feet like forgiveness. He stood very still, the way a man stands when a word returns to him that he did not know he had lost. He cried like someone washing his face. People pretend that transformation is a montage. In reality, it is chores. Weeks turned. Kofi built slower. He repaired more phones. He partnered with a women's cooperative that had been selling shea butter at margins set by impatience, and helped them set prices with dignity, not desperation. He spent Saturdays at the borehole site, not as a donor but as a neighbor. He organized a reading corner in the kiosk with second-hand books and a plug for charging devices, because power is also cultural. He still wanted success. He did not turn saint because saints make poor neighbors. He kept ambition but changed its diet. When city people came through, some asked what had happened to the big sign and the sudden glow. He said, "I returned rented light." A few nodded like they recognized the bill. At night, he slept inside his name and woke with a hunger that did not shame him. The moral is not exotic. It does not glitter. Greed warps the mirror. Shortcuts reroute you past yourself. Every society has its versions. Quick money dressed as opportunity. Clout trading as respect. Influence swapping clothes with wisdom. Corruption smiling like help. Scams that speak your language better than your grandmother. The stranger is not always a man in a suit who refuses dust. Sometimes the stranger is an app with a free trial. A contract with friendly fonts. A friend who says, "No one will know." A thought that says, "You deserve it faster." The price is usually the same shape. Something you cannot live without wearing a name you have not yet learned. Do not barter your witness for applause. Do not exchange your shadow for a trending sound. Plant what you can explain, in daylight, in community, at a pace that does not break your story. Kofi still walks to the market on nights when lanterns argue with stars, and when he passes, speakers turn to the limit. His shape dances on the dust like an honest receipt. He is not famous, he is seen. That is a wealth that spends clean. If the stranger came to you tonight and offered to lend you light you could not keep, what would you do? Tell the truth in the comments. Say what you have learned from deals that looked like blessings on arrival and fines on exit. Share this with someone who is running so fast they can no longer feel their feet. Then check the other folktales and see how old wisdom keeps changing outfits to fit our time.